If you're in the market for a new corporate camera, you might be considering the Sony FX9, the FX6, the FX3, or even the Sony A7 IV. However, maybe you should look past all of them and just go for an A7 IV. Hello, my name is Jonathan Palfrey and welcome back to my YouTube channel. Please like and subscribe as it massively helps me out. Now today I want to talk to you, not necessarily a review of this camera, which will be coming down the line, so make sure you subscribe because it will be coming soon. But I wanted to talk about how actually the A7 IV could be the perfect corporate camera. Now, it's not to say it's a perfect camera, of course not. You know, there are many things that are missing from this camera that I'd love to see in here. However, for the price and for what you get, you're not compromising on much. And maybe it's the best option out of all those cameras. Now, I know what you're saying. Are mirrorless cameras really good enough to be an A camera for corporate shoots? Not just that, sort of an entry-level camera being a camera for a shoot. Yes, they've been used a lot as B cameras over the years. We used to have an A7S with our FS7, for example. The FS7 was a wonderful camera that we used for a long time. It was our kind of main corporate camera. It's been used in TV a huge amount, and it became a real staple of the industry. Now, we've seen that the FX9 hasn't really become that. Yes, those bigger cameras, they were excellent in their time, but now the image quality, the functions, and everything you would ever want to do with one of those cameras, you can do in a much smaller, compact body. And that is something that is just so much more useful. It means you've got more room in your camera bag. It means you can put all your lights, all your audio, everything, and lenses, all of it can go into a single bag rather than having to carry multiple bags, for example. Much better for a one-man band. It means it's more likely you can carry multiple bodies also on you in the same bag. You're certainly going to be carrying 3 FS7s with you, but you could certainly be carrying 3 A7 IVs. Now I hear what you're saying. Yeah, they're great, the image is great, but try telling that to the clients. They see this and just think it's, you know, the camera they use to shoot their kids with. And well, yeah, that is partly true. It is pretty much the same camera. But at the end of the day, they're hiring you because of your creative abilities, not what you turn up and shoot on. Nowadays, the quality, the gap between, you know, consumer and professional is so tight. It really has merged into one. And there isn't really much difference between the two now, except for the odd feature here or there. It really does come down now to the skill of the operator. You know, it's your creativity, it's your storytelling, it's your technical ability, it's how you use lighting. It's all of those things combined that make you stand out and why the client chooses you to do a shoot. I still see really terrible stuff being shot by clients at all different levels. So there really is a market, no matter what level you're going in at, no matter whether it's a small local job or a big national corporate company that you're working with, at all those different levels, there's a real need for creative professionals like ourselves. And don't just take my word for it. You know, one of the slowest moving industries in the world is certainly TV news. They've been sticking with those big broadcast shoulder-mounted cameras for years and years, but finally that shift is happening. We're seeing them using mirrorless cameras like the A7S III, like the FX3, cameras like the FX6, much smaller cameras than they ever would have used in the past. So there really is, I don't think, any reason to be fearful of using a mirrorless camera on a corporate shoot anymore. The question is though, do you need to go for cameras like the FX3 or the maybe R5C, or could you go for the more affordable option, the A7 IV? So you're saving quite a bit of money going with the A7 IV over cameras like the FX3 and the A7S III. Is that saving worth it though? Are you losing too many functions and features by going for the more affordable option? Well, first off, let's talk about image quality. And I have to say, with this camera, you're really not compromising. The A7 IV is probably the first camera where actually it doesn't compromise compared to its, you know, bigger brother, the A7S and FX3. Suddenly you're getting the same bit rates, you're getting the same kind of image quality, the same color quality as those other cameras. And in some ways you're getting advantages too. With its 7K sensor downsampling to 4K, you actually get a much sharper image with the A7 IV compared to the FX3. Now, of course, you do lose out on the higher frame rates. You're not going to get 120 frames in 4K like you do on the FX3, but I don't think that's necessarily a bad thing. I think 60p is enough in most scenarios. Yes, you do have the crop, But actually, once again, when shooting in the corporate world, you're probably not needing a wide angle slow motion shot. The chances are you're probably getting a close up of a person or something like that in an office, in which case the crop isn't actually a big of a deal as you may first think. Another advantage that you may have not thought about is actually the dual ISO levels are slightly different than what you get on the FX3 and A7S III. Because its upper base ISO is only 3200 compared to 12,000 on the FX3, you actually get a much more kind of usable second clean image out of this camera. And what I mean by that is often, it's amazing that you can shoot super clean images at 12,800 ISO on the FX3. That is absolutely incredible. But in fact, in most scenarios, that's far too much. You actually end up needing a lot of ND indoors to sort of counteract, keep it all under control if you want to keep a shallow depth of field. Whereas 3200 is a much more sort of usable area for a lot of sort of indoor shooting, I would say in most situations. If you're shooting under normal lights, for example, you're probably more wanting to push up to about that much while shooting slow motion than you would be going up to 12,800 ISO. That means in those middling ISOs where you're more likely to be shooting in those scenarios, you're going to get a much cleaner image with the A7 IV. Now, one concern people may have with the A7 IV is overheating. And I have to say, under my experience, I have no issues. The first thing you've got to do, as I did in my menu video, is go in there and switch it so that the overheat temperature warning goes to high rather than normal. That will sort you out initially. Yes, if you do continuous shooting hour upon hour, it will come up with the overheating warning. I did some tests, which I'll do a full video talking about that in the near future. In that, I tested it and it looked about around 2 hours of continuous shooting where you started seeing an overheating warning on the camera. Now, it depends on what you're shooting. There would be certain shoots where, of course, that would be a big problem, where if you're doing long form interviews, one after the other perhaps, all day long, or if you're maybe shooting an event where you've got to continuously record, and that's the key thing there, continuously record, then that may also be a problem, and you want to then look at cameras that have built-in fans. That said, a lot of corporate work, and certainly a lot of the work that we do, interviews are quite short actually. Usually it's filming multiple people throughout the day in short snippets, getting the key lines that they need to get across for their corporate film. So in fact, generally the interviews probably don't last longer than 10 minutes at a time. Then you'll stop, you'll set up again for something else, the camera might turn off for a little bit. So the overheating isn't, I don't think, a big of a deal as perhaps people would be concerned about with it. It's not going to be a problem I think you would come across that often. That large sensor, of course, has another great advantage too, and that is that it takes really good photos. At the end of the day, this is a proper hybrid camera compared to the likes of the A7S III and FX3, where certainly only having 12 megapixels is a compromise. It's not to say that 12 megapixels is bad or not good enough, because actually for the vast majority of the stuff that ends up just on Instagram, it's certainly more than good enough. But if shooting professionally, I feel more confident using the A7 IV for photography, certainly. You're not compromising in other areas too, such as autofocus. Autofocus on the A7 IV is just as good as the FX3, and that's great to see. We're getting such good autofocus now, and I think, once again, in the corporate world, don't worry about having to do manual focus. There's a little bit of snobbish, I think, when it comes to, oh, I'm a proper cinematographer, I use manual cinema lenses. No, do what actually makes your life easier in those shooting scenarios. So yeah, it's great. If you've got a first AC and you've got someone who can pull proper focus for you, and it's going to look great and you can do exactly the movements you want, brilliant, use them. However, when you're a one-man band running around and you're setting up the lighting, you're setting up all the equipment, you may even be doing the interviews as well, you really don't want to be, compromising or risking getting it out of focus. You would do all this amazing setup, you could do the best lighting, you could spend all this time, making sure the background looks wonderful, but suddenly if it's just slightly out of focus, that interview is pretty much ruined. It's not going to look very good, and it's the first thing a client's going to notice. Clients don't actually notice if the color balance is slightly off. They don't really notice if there's, slightly ugly shadows, things like that. They don't really notice things like noise or rolling shutter, all the things that we worry every day about and kind of pixel peep and go, oh, I'm not sure if I'll pick that camera because of this reason or that reason. No, but one thing they will spot is if the image is out of focus. That's something that they can see a mile away. So I think for me, having good autofocus is a critical part of a good corporate video camera. As well as saving space, the A7 IV also is a good saving in money. compared to the FX3 is a much more affordable camera, which means maybe you can buy two instead of one. Having, you know, a backup camera I think is so critical on shoots. Once again, as I mentioned before, clients aren't going to notice if you've got the fanciest new camera, even though you're just doing something that's going to go on their Instagram. However, they will notice if one of your cameras break down and you don't have a spare one there to carry on shooting. You know, having two just gives you more options. You can do multicam, you can keep one spare just in case. For me, I'd rather have two more affordable cameras than just one more expensive one. Not unique to the A7 IV, but something that you should certainly be aware of if you do a lot of corporate work, and that is the 10-bit proxy mode in the camera. Now you're thinking, do you need to use proxies? Do you not? That's, you know, personal preference whether you do that or not. It depends on your computer setup. But actually for me, what's impressive about the proxies is the image quality you get out of them. They are really good. Even though the file sizes are tiny, they're still 10-bit, which is amazing to see. So you still got that color information in there, but they're a lot smaller file sizes. Yes, obviously you can't push them as hard. You've got to be careful about movement and things like that. But if you're just doing an interview, for example, a piece to camera, and perhaps you need to send that off quickly to an editor, this is actually more than good enough to use in a corporate situation. You could certainly use that in the final film without actually using the original 4K or HD footage. Linked to that is the live streaming capability in this camera. Now I haven't actually tested it, I haven't really played around with it, but it's awesome that they've got something like that built in. You know, it's just a case of plugging in and it can effectively act as a webcam over USB-C. More and more now, corporate clients need kind of live streams, you know, especially since we've done a lot of work from home. They may have a lot of their clients or their colleagues watching from home. So live streaming is becoming a more and more important part of that. And this is great that it's built into the camera. It just provides a really quick, simple way of doing a quick corporate live stream without a huge outlay of costs. Now you might be concerned that the A7 IV doesn't have, you know, any XLR audio inputs. Like, is that good enough if you're using it in a corporate environment? And I'd say, well, reality, what are you actually shooting most of the time? For me, we almost exclusively use the Rode Wireless Go 2 microphones. They have been excellent. The Go 1s and the Go 2s, excellent microphones, are more than good enough. Okay, they're not going to be as good as a, you know, a very well positioned, good quality boom going over the top. But actually when you're in a fast-paced situation, lapels work great. You know, there's no wires going anywhere, which is good for health and safety reasons, but it also just means a simpler, cleaner setup. And for me, the Wireless 2 Go's are excellent audio quality, especially for the price and especially because of their size and their functionality. Pairing one of those with the A7 IV, I think it really wouldn't be missing using XLR audio inputs. Now, of course, it does lack built-in ND filters, which is a shame, and that's one thing I wish one day these mirrorless cameras be able to achieve. I think it was rumours of it years ago that it was going to happen, Sony had developed something, but unfortunately we haven't seen that materialise into anything. So there you go, there's my pitch to you and why you should probably consider the A7 IV as your next corporate camera over those much more expensive options. It's missing certain features that I'd love to see it have. It doesn't have things like ND filters, it doesn't have, you know, shutter angle, it doesn't have things like waveform monitor or false color. But actually, in the most shooting situations that you'll be using this camera with in the corporate world, this has more than enough capability to please your clients. And that's what really matters. And that's what I want to really get across here, is remember actually what you're doing this for. You're doing it for the client. It may be different if you're doing short films for yourself or you're doing things for bigger clients and commercial shoots. But when you're doing stuff for the vast majority of corporate clients, they just need something that where the image quality looks good, it's sharp, it's in focus, the colors are nice, the people look good on camera. And in that world, this camera ticks those boxes, no problem, if you've got the skills to match it. I'd love to know what you think. Is the A7 IV the perfect corporate camera, or is it really missing some really key features that you just could not live without, which is going to make you stay with a more expensive camera? Please let me know in the comment section down below. I hope you found this video very useful. If you have, please like and subscribe, and I will see you next time for another video. Goodbye.